let's get started. It is 6 o'clock. Just as a bit of housekeeping, I would ask if you're here in person, don't connect to the Zoom by your device because it'll just overwhelm the Wi-Fi network here. So we'd ask you not to do that. We want to keep everyone connected. There's about 30 people so far who are on the Zoom platform. So I want to thank you for joining us this evening, whether you're attending in person or through the Zoom virtual platform. We truly appreciate your attendance for what we believe is the final step in our information gathering process regarding the privately owned Housatonic Waterworks Company. This has been a long and challenging journey for our community. Making a decision of this magnitude requires that we have all the relevant information at hand. To consider acquiring the water system, the Select Board and Finance Committee need to be fully informed. Additionally, residents and taxpayers must also be fully informed before this can be addressed at an annual or more likely special town meeting. In 2021, we conducted a comprehensive study to assess the capital needs of this water system. This included evaluating the water supply, the water treatment plant, the water storage tank, and the water distribution system. The finding of that study estimated the system-wide capital needs to be approximately $31 million. In early 2023, we undertook a cost appraisal of the system and engaged a qualified utility consultant to provide us with a fair market value option. 3 different approaches were employed: the income approach, the market approach, and the asset approach. In summary, the estimated value of the system is in the range of $2.3 million. Armed with this information, we now move into the final phase, determining what it will cost the town to purchase and operate this system. The Select Board will be seeing this presentation for the first time this evening, along with you, and we don't anticipate making any decisions tonight. At this point, I'd like to introduce both David and Justin from DPC Engineering. They are here tonight to present their findings to the boards and to you, the customers of Housatonic Waterworks, who will ultimately be responsible for approving the purchase and covering the costs moving forward. Thank you for your patience throughout this process. I'll turn it over to DPC. After their presentation, they'll be available for question and answer sessions, where I encourage you to voice your questions and concerns. Your input is invaluable as we navigate this important decision. When we do questions and answers, we'll do in person, rotating with people online, so we'll go from one to the other. I anticipate the Select Board will use this information gathered tonight to continue our strategy sessions and move this forward in a much more expedient manner. So I will turn it over to DPC now. Thank you.
Good evening. Dave Prickett, Justin Skelly with DPC Engineering. Everybody inside the room hear me okay? Excellent. Okay. We're going to give you, as the intro stated, kind of our take on where things are at relative to this financial model or hypothetical financial model. We're going to cover several things this evening. This is kind of a highlight of the major themes or categories. We'll provide an overview of the existing Housatonic Waterworks utility, review why we're here this evening and our approach to this project, talk about available data and information, and anytime you do one of these evaluations about a hypothetical change, you have to make several assumptions. So you hear some of those this evening. Again, there are independent opinion and just that. We'll compare the alternatives that we developed so that the stakeholders in the community can make an informed decision or decisions about possible next steps. And yeah, we'll hit the next steps. So really the first order of business is just to kind of give a quick overview, and obviously I'm guessing the majority of the folks in the room may in fact live in Housatonic and be water customers up there. But it is a private utility as opposed to a lot of communities that we work with and some of your neighboring communities that have public water utilities. So that makes it unique in its own right. You have a small customer base up there, only about 850 customers. As you can understand, with any sort of utility with a limited customer base, that also makes the prospect of making improvements very challenging because there are a limited number of people and customers that can pay for those upgrades. There is another water utility in Great Barrington, the Great Barrington Fire District, which I would describe as being kind of a semi-public private entity, slightly in between like the town's wastewater department and the Housatonic Water Works company. And then there are some folks in Great Barrington that are on private wells, a limited amount. But just to point this out, the town of Great Barrington, despite having a wastewater utility, does not have a water utility of its own. So in terms of the existing infrastructure, there's kind of three parts of a water system. There's supply, there's treatment, and then there's distribution. You have a surface water supply up there. You have 17 miles of pipe. Basically, the pipes are network under the ground that travel through your neighborhood and provide individual services to each property that's served. Some of the primary challenges, at least, again, from our perception with that existing utility, is that there are a lot of old and undersized pipes, and that makes water distribution very challenging. There are also some treatment needs that obviously are important to resolve some of the challenges that have existed over the past years. And with old pipes and undersized pipes come fire flow protection challenges. So obviously, in the horrible event that there is a fire or the fire department needs adequate water and pressure, it's really hard to pull those pressures through small and undersized pipes. You just can't get what you need. So those are some of the concerns just on a broad base. The reason that we're here this evening to present our findings is many of the residents of Housatonic that are served by Housatonic Water Works came to the town, to the select board, and asked the town to try to intervene, to try to see if they could be a partner towards solving this. So that's essentially why we're here. Our project scope starts with reviewing available information, and as you can see, I tried to highlight kind of the takeaway main points on each slide in an orange italic. We did not have detailed customer data parcel by parcel for Housatonic Water Works. That made us make some broader assumptions. Overall average over the 847 customers. What we often like to do when we have the detailed data is show where things are at for the median and for people at the lower percentile who, oftentimes are seniors not using a lot of water, but in this case we've made some broader brush assumptions that you'll see as this unfolds. The target or the goal was to develop what might happen or what might this look like if the town were to become the owner and operator of the water utility. So you're going to hear reference to probably too many engineering terms tonight. I apologize in advance, but years 0 through 5 are essentially, year 0 is day 1 after an acquisition. So steady state, it's a transition, it's a pass off, and then year 1 through 5 represents a capital plan. And when we describe the capital plans, both Housatonic Water Works and the town have slightly different visions for the capital plans that are involved. You'll also hear some information on financing, some acronyms that are thrown out here. The town would historically have 3 options for financing, one of which is conventional bonding. The second and third are the ones that become more attractive for a municipal entity. One involves using state revolving fund. That's with the state of Massachusetts. It's a low-interest, long-term loan. Another one is through the United States Department of Agriculture. It's rural development. Great Barrington Fire District has used this in the past. Those allow even longer-term loans, low interest rates. Both come with some form of grant or principal forgiveness, and that's really something that's unique on the town side, the ability to be eligible for those sorts of funding, financing opportunities. And then ultimately we'll summarize our opinion of what we believe the annual cost might look like as things unfold from year 0 through 5. So some of the information that we've gathered and some of the assumptions that had to be made. The intro appropriately discussed, there's been several past projects that were done. We had been involved about 6 years ago with an initial project looking at this. You then had another consultant, AECOM, who developed a very robust capital plan in principle for both supply, treatment, distribution for Housatonic. And then just a year ago, you had Reftelis, a consultant that specializes in these financial evaluations, provide their opinion of what they thought the value was or of the assets up at Housatonic Waterworks. And you heard mention from that at the beginning of the intro. One of the key elements or places that we were able to get some information that was helpful to compare alternatives was the Department of Public Utilities settlement earlier this year with Housatonic Waterworks. In that settlement, we were able to pull out what the capital plans were that were proposed, what the current budget is, what the budget in year 0 might look like, and what the budgets in years 1 through 5 might look like should that be implemented. So that was very helpful. So we start kind of with that estimated value, right? On day one, if you're going to acquire an asset, there has to be a transition. So folks on different sides of this would have very different ideas of what the value of an asset might be. But just in terms of data that's out there, Reftelis estimated that the value was $2.3 million. The questions or the key questions that would be made as this unfolds in the presentation is, how is that asset being purchased? Is it being purchased by the Housatonic water customers, or is it being purchased by the town as a whole? So those would be decisions, again, options, sub-alternatives that the group would collectively need to decide. We had developed, let me just take a step back. AECOM had developed a capital plan, pretty robust, almost $34 million in present day cost. A lot of that is treatment, a lot of that is pipes, a lot of pipes. So there's an estimated, net value, if you will, negative of $30 million. So our opinion or take on that is we compare what's the current value or depreciated value of an asset in our eyes versus what's the capital plan. It's kind of like buying a house. If you're buying a house that needs a whole lot of work after you buy it, you want to weigh the pros and cons relative to whether that investment is worth it. So in terms of our conceptual budget approach, again, we utilized local and regional budgets and other utilities. And what I mean by that is we have access to your very detailed wastewater budget in Great Barrington. We have access to budgets as public information from other water utilities in the Berkshires. And then we have budget information that was available from the DPU settlement. So essentially what we tried to do was identify what that capital plan would look like and how might they compare. And from this point forward, essentially, we're looking at two options: continued ownership and implementation of a capital plan by Housatonic Waterworks, and the conceptual acquisition and implementation of a capital plan and operation by the town of Great Barrington. I guess one key difference to note is through the AECOM capital plan for the town side versus what we're able to observe in the DPU settlement, we believe there to be more pipe capital needs earlier on than are currently projected in the DPU settlement. So under the town side, it's not quite apples and apples where we compare the two alternatives. There's more capital being performed for the town alternatives. So in terms of our summary of alternatives, we kind of have, two, but we have some sub-alternatives underneath them. Housatonic Waterworks, very simply, that stays the same. Capital plan gets implemented like DPU. On the town side, there are some subcategories. We've assumed no grants in our projections of annualized cost. We're living in a time right now where grants are extremely competitive. Grants are hard to come by. They certainly are a possibility on the town side, but I wouldn't want to bank on those in terms of presenting information so the group can make informed decisions. But I mentioned about SRF and USDA. There's basically two sides to the town equation, funding things over a 20-year period versus funding things over a 40-year period. And then within those, there's the sub-options of each, of whether a purchase or an acquisition would be paid by just the water customers alone or the town as a whole, essentially through the general fund. Can you hold that for a couple more minutes? I'm going fast. Justin wrote it down. All right. You good? Okay. So this is where some of the graphs, and I'm sorry, the engineer, can't take the engineer out of the engineer here. We're just trying to do our best to illustrate things. We start with the baseline. This is our take of what the average monthly cost would be per water customer under a year 0 through 5 implementation plan for Housatonic Waterworks. Should nothing change, this is our interpretation of what things would look like for the customers over the next 5 years, 5+ years. And essentially what we've tried to do from left to right next to each year is show what that dollar cost is per month. At the beginning of my presentation, I told you I would have much rather been able to show what things were for the median single-family home, but we did not have access to that detailed water billing database, which would have allowed us to do that. So we've simply taken the numerator, the budget, divided by the denominator, the number of customers, and come up with an average cost per customer. So I would expect that these numbers would be higher than the median household income, but I got to start somewhere. Next up, this represents the town under the SRF funding, so 20-year financing at 2% interest rates. This is the same vertical scale on the left. So you could see if the town were to acquire the utility, and you kind of see two lines at the top. The solid line at the top represents if the customers, only the water customers, were paying the cost of the acquisition. The dotted line represents the cost, i.e. a decrease, if the town, through the general fund, was paying the acquisition. Generally speaking, these costs are significantly higher for this green chart than the orange checkered before. No idea how I came up with these colors, but I think they work when we get to the end, when you see them laid on top of each other. This is the alternative for the town acquisition where USDA funding might be used. And you'll see the power of leveraging the debt over a longer 40-year period. It's just like with the house, with the mortgage. You can take the 30-year note. It's a lower monthly payment, but you're going to pay more interest over the life of the loan. Or you can take a 20-year note and pay total less dollars, but you're going to have a higher monthly cost. So here you're seeing that the cost came down on the blue. Same idea here, though, with water customers paying the acquisition and the town paying the acquisition. You can see that it comes down $12. And that's the same for the previous chart. I should have mentioned that, about $12 per month. All right, this is where you put it all together and things start to get interesting, and you can kind of see where things are at. So these are all three of the previous charts placed together. We kind of stack them. See, the original Housatonic is in the front. That's the orange checker. The USDA 40-year note by the town is the blue. And the green represents the town side under SRF 20-year. When we look at, and I didn't put the labels on this chart, there was just too much going on, but when you take a look at this, you start to, again, not an opinion, you're just looking at data that's there. There's a much higher initial cost for the town to acquire an asset than to stay status quo. Over time, what I believe is the power of the town's ability to have long-term, low-interest loans starts to stabilize or flatten the cost. So the slope is slightly different of the two trends. And then this one is just a similar iteration of the previous chart where you say, what does this mean to people up in Housatonic? Well, this red is, I always refer to the box. This is the box that you'd be in, somewhere between the two. Again, in year zero, what jumps out to me there is cost might be going from $70 to $130 per month if the town were to acquire it. As you get out towards year 5, it's about $10 different, so it starts to flatten out a little bit. Again, data observations independently, annual cost for the users, as I mentioned, very steep cost increase if the town were to take the utility under either financing option. And that's partially because the town may have a different approach relative to staffing than is currently being utilized. It's also due to the fact that on the town side, there's a much more robust capital plan. So the annual payment for that capital plan is higher in year 1. Long-term cost projections, again, they start to flatten out and kind of convene to each other. Who knows what year it is? Again, this is our opinion of available data, and we're trying to just kind of macroscopically identify what this formula might look like. There's a whole bunch of other considerations in addition to public sentiment, which I acknowledge is an incredibly powerful one. But just relative to the data, the town brings a significant enhancement relative to financing, being able to possibly get grants, being able to get long-term low-interest loans. Those are likely things that Housatonic Waterworks cannot do on their own because they're a private entity. One challenge with that on the flip side becomes anytime the town bonds a project, whether it's wastewater, whether it's other infrastructure, or whether in this case it's the consideration of a water capital plan, those bonds have impacts on the town's overall bonding limit, bonding capacity, potentially on their bond rating. So these are things that would need to be considered by people far more educated than me on municipal finance. And those things could obviously potentially negatively impact the town's ability to fund other capital projects. So again, it's not one or the other, it just needs to be things that the group considers collectively as things unfold. I stated at the beginning, you're not in the water business right now, the town of Great Barrington, so establishing a water business, it's kind of like when a company takes on a whole new service line. It could go really well, it could be really hard, but certainly trying to do things on the town side, staffing and everything else are the same challenges that everyone has right now in this world. Possible next steps? Well, you'd certainly want to, when we present our report to the select board, you'd want to confirm or review our assumptions that go into our conclusions based on the data. There are a lot of assumptions that have gone in there on both sides. And then I think most importantly, you'd want to try to balance the benefits with the risks, both from everyone that's in the room, not us, but everyone that lives in the room, presumably Great Barrington residents. So there's that whole dynamic, but then there's the whole financial thing. So it's just pros and cons with the hope that people can make informed decisions. And then, lastly, seeking input from other specialists, whether they be legal, regulatory, other project stakeholders, that's going to be critical should this unfold. You did good, you hung in there. You want to, how do you want to handle the Q&A? I know we had one teed up here. Would you like to go to the mic, miss, or would you like me to repeat your question?
Yeah, so I think your question was how, are the limited number of customers, going to be able to afford, such a hefty capital plan?
Good evening. So I was trying to say that there's only 850 customers. I mean, I found that hard to believe, but most of us, if they're seniors, are on fixed incomes, Social Security, maybe some extra money here and there. But for us to have to pay for something like that seems like totally ludicrous. I mean, we pay our taxes to the town of Great Barrington, and water is a right. We have the right to drink water, and for that kind of money and that kind of an expense, I feel like the town of Great Barrington should take some look at it. It's comparing water to an old house that is run down is totally ludicrous in my opinion. You know, you said when you buy an old house and you have to fix it up, you know, well, we're not buying a house. We're trying to get water that we can drink in our town without hurting people, You know, I put a Brita on my kitchen sink. I put a filter in my shower. But, you know, if you have kids and they have to take a bath, you can't filter the bathtub water. You know, you can filter the shower, but it's hard to filter the bathtub. But anyway.
So let me try to answer the first part from the Select Board's point of view, because they're really dealing with facts.
Yeah.
And we haven't made a decision how we're going to do this. We're waiting for this report. But just to remind you, one of the dilemmas is residents of Great Barrington proper, who are on the Great Barrington Fire District, already pay for water.
Right.
So to ask them to pay twice may be a dilemma going forward.
Right,
So
but
it's something we haven't figured out.
But we're helping pay the taxes of Great Barrington. My road has not been paved in 24 years, my street. Not once has it been paved.
I'm not debating, I'm just
Yeah,
telling.
I'm just trying to tell you.
I understand your
right.
point.
They
Well,
might be unfair, but it's unfair for us to pay for everything they need too.
the bottom
But we're
line will
doing
be,
it.
the bottom line will be is that the vote, the town meeting vote, will be of all residents of Great Barrington. So we have to figure out a way
Yeah,
to
but
make
there's
it.
only 850 of us. Of course, 1,000 other voters are going to outvote us.
So there's
I
my
mean,
point. So we have to figure out a way to do that,
Yeah.
that we can get this to pass, because we got to get this water. If we can figure out a way to do this, that is fair, it will pass, and it will start the process of fixing up Housatonic Waterworks.
Right.
So I don't disagree with anything you said.
And
We
what
we
about
don't have the magic answer.
Yeah, and the government grants, they won't help with water issues? I mean, I can see
We're not
that-
there yet. You're absolutely
Okay.
right. We
All
will
right.
ask federal government, state government,
Right.
grants. Those haven't been figured in because none of them are guaranteed. None of them, you know, you can ask for state grants, but when we ask for money to be given from the federal government, we don't have any guarantees yet.
Right,
So you're on the right track.
okay.
Mark, do you have someone online? Who's online, Mark? Alan, go ahead.
Hi, I think the person who just spoke said some of the things that I was going to say. If this comes to some sort of a town vote, which it looks like it could potentially, it seems like the town needs to identify potential sources of support, government support, wherever, as part of a strategy to get support for this project, because we will be asking other voters in Great Barrington to help us with this. And I do believe that we need to come up with a really good plan that somehow reduces the financial impact on the town overall. I don't think the water users in Housatonic can shoulder this alone. I think that we need support from the town and our neighbors in downtown Great Barrington.
Thank you,
And coming
Alan.
up with a finance plan, even some potential funding sources will help a great deal.
Just a reminder, this report is the last piece of the puzzle. Now we
Right.
have the information we need to move forward. So, yes, you're absolutely right, Ellen.
Hi, Sharon Gregory, Hollenbeck Avenue. I'm not a Housatonic water user, but I am a financial analyst, so I think we're missing another piece of information. And the reason I say that is the Great Barrington Fire District users are charged a different way than Housatonic water users. They split the cost of water usage, right? We get a quarterly bill for the usage, and I can't remember what it is, but and then for the capital expenditures, and those who are Housatonic, Great Barrington water users paid, basically, what they asked for is $5 million of capital expenditures about a year and a half ago. And that's now in our, it's on our tax bill as the fire district. So my question is, if you did the same thing, disaggregated the, scary annual monthly cost of Housatonic water and said the actual water usage would be billed differently from the capital plan, I think that would really help a lot more. And the second reason it would help is that the portion that I pay for capital plan is based on the value, the appraised value of my house. So because Housatonic has a lot of rentals, Great Barrington has too, but I think the last master plan showed Housatonic had more. They wouldn't be contributing to the capital plan. It's the more expensive houses that would pay the bulk of the capital plan. So I think it would be fairer, because it scares people who think that they're going to double, the rate, to show the, how that changes in terms of the value of your real estate. That does put more cost on the owners of the property, and some of them don't even live in Housatonic. I know I've gone through the, real estate holdings and things like that. So that's, I think, the missing piece of how we should look at it, and I think that'll calm people down. And when you look at it like that, I think it doesn't look so scary like, oh, Great Barrington has to pay for all this extra, or Housatonic is going to be left in the, I think you will see something more comparable. The second point I'd just like to make quickly is that Great Barrington does have expertise in the water business. And I've gone to a lot of Great Barrington Fire District meetings. I have a great deal of respect for the overseers of them. And I know they employ, I can't remember, was a number, 8, 9, 10, 11 people who take care of the Great Barrington, water system. And, right now you think Housatonic water is being taken care of by 2 people. And they have some consultants, but that just doesn't seem to be scary. Okay, maybe, they use a lot of consultants, but I think it's on a defensive basis. It's not for the operating basis. We would need some consultants, but it's not so scary to me. And if you talk to these people, I think they know what they're doing. So I think we're lucky to have a basis, and if we shared that, and we could still separate, like, okay, these 10 people work on Great Barrington Fire District, these people work on the Housatonic water business, then people don't think that they're paying for somebody else doing something other than what they're serving. So, in my opinion, we can have quite a bit of equitable cost and pricing if we keep the systems measured comparably, and the costs too. You could have cost savings by, having the same billing system, the same administrative system. You just code it separately so that, you can always say, this is what it costs for Housatonic water and this for, the fire district. Anyway, thank you for considering it.
I guess the one question from that statement that I can respond to is that I can say that the first cut at this, 100% of the revenue to pay the annual budget projections are from the users. They're not from the general fund. The one caveat that we made was the acquisition cost, where I think it was like, for that $2.3 million, I think was like an average cost of $12 per month per customer. And again, nothing you said is incorrect, or we started with the data that we had, and we had to start kind of, in my opinion, at the worst case scenario. And to your point, if portions of the capital were shared, I believe was what you kind of described, between the general fund and the users, then that obviously would bring the portion of the revenue tied to user fees down, right? Because then you'd have two components to your revenue stream. You'd have a contribution from the general fund and the user fees.
Peggy, go ahead. Just state your name and address.
Assuming we merge the system, I was curious about the availability of the supply of the actual water. If the town took over the Housatonic customers, the all 850, is the current water supply used by the fire district adequate to take on 850 more customers? And is the water supply fine going into Housatonic, just lousy pipes?
So let me first answer something, and I think people are getting a little confused. There is no plans to touch the Great Barrington Fire District. It's a separate entity, and they have no desire to become a town system. So right now, what we're looking at is Housatonic Water Works, and their water supply is fine. We believe that with the right capital improvements, we can, over years, improve the water. It won't happen overnight. But Great Barrington Fire District is not part of this plan right now.
Tracy Agum for Oak Street in Housatonic. I'm just curious as to, with these calculations, do they consider the length of time that this company has been allowed to ride roughshod over our water, and yet we have to pay to get what is our right? I mean, you said how difficult it was to get a grant. I mean, forgive me if I'm wrong, but didn't Housatonic Water just get a $300,000 plus grant? I mean, their pockets should be dug into before our pockets are dug into, because we're the victims. And I think that, should be prevalent. We are all the victims here. And, if maybe one day collectively we all make this decision to just stop paying them, maybe they'll get it, because it just seems like they're driven by money, not providing a quality service. Thank you.
Thank you. Deborah, just state your name, please, full name.
Deborah Herman. Do you want my address? North Plain Road.
Thank you.
Okay, I just have two questions. One is, what about the Housatonic customers who live in West Stockbridge and Stockbridge? Will they be part of this process in any way? And my second question has to do with, I know the Board of Health order to provide bottled water was not upheld, but assuming that the town or whoever the water system is taken over, it's sold by Housatonic Water to some entity, will they be providing people with bottled water or other methods of ameliorating the problems that will probably persist in the system for years? Thank you. Those are my two questions.
So I'll answer the second one first. It's premature to even talk about that. We're barely past the third study stage, and that is something that the town or whoever the entity is will have to decide. The other part of this is the Housatonic Water is one system, so it does have some customers in Stockbridge and West Stockbridge, and they are included in this.
Good evening. First of all, thank you very much for your study. I think it was, I know how challenging it is, and I know how challenging these problems are for the select board and the town manager. So I very much appreciate the work and the dedication that I know has been there over the course of the past years in dealing with this very challenging problem. My name is Jennifer Tabakin. I live at 1084 Main Street in Housatonic, and our water has been very brown and problematic for us for the past 2 years particularly. There's been an uptick in the problem with it. I want to suggest a couple things that I'd like to see added to the agenda, which probably may warrant additional time and discussion, so that I'm not looking for an answer from them now, but hopefully this will help. I have an expertise in urban planning, infrastructure, and capital program planning, and so I'm bringing these questions based on my experience. The first thing, I think we need to separate the current day-to-day issue that we're dealing with in Housatonic from the difficult process of purchasing and acquiring a water company. So I'm wondering if we can come up with some solutions with getting some additional analysis of the discolored water and the various engineering solutions to it. I looked at the papers that were out there. There were holes in the data. There was not consistency in terms of whether the proposed solution is going to benefit all the residents there. And I think that there should be maybe additional engineering review so that that can be addressed with a sense of urgency, so that's not put off while we're dealing with the complicated financial issues on it. I think that implementation needs to be required as soon as possible. It could potentially be something that is required prior to a purchase of the Housatonic water, that they implement it, or some agreement that the town implement it, if that be a filtration system or what have you, but a real understanding about what that problem is and if it's impacting all of the 800 users. So I suggest that not fall from the top of the agenda. The second thing I think that we do need to add to a further discussion is a vision here for what a model of a municipal water system is. Water is a municipal service in many, many towns. Many places in Massachusetts provide municipal water. It's a standard service. Some towns provide it directly by their own staff operating it. Others will outsource it to a firm or engineering firm that operates water systems. So the town's function would be to pay for that service or some sort of combination of that. But I'm very much in the camp of knowing that the system, if we look at a water system as a whole for the entire Great Barrington, is the most efficient and equitable system to provide people water. In Great Barrington, we have the Housatonic water, we have the fire district, and we have many, many residents who also have private wells, which they're paying out of pocket for upkeep and have a variety of sort of quality water issues depending on maybe how long their well is or what their status as the well is. Water is best provided by the public system, so even if we can entice some of the people on the wells to come over to a larger water system, that could bring on more customers. More customers, a larger system, reduces the price of the water for all. You get economies of scale, you get an ability to have the engineering expertise. And one thing that I think is really critical here is that we're all in this together. So currently, Housatonic is being real estate, in my view, not based on any data, is that the prices potentially are decreasing. If the assessed value of the real estate in Housatonic goes down, well, those who have higher assessed values pay a little bit more taxes. So we're benefiting, if we have these public services benefiting all people equitably, we have a more equitable payment of the share of the cost of the public services. One thing that's a notable difference is that the commercial sector is a big water user. We have some very big institutions, luckily in Great Barrington, hospitals, ski resorts, that offset that pay quite a bit for water, and their costs will essentially reduce the share that's on the residential payers. I think a combined system could share equitably on the benefits of the commercial ratepayers, and then provide some more opportunity for equitable cost sharing and a way to mitigate the issue at hand between the Housatonic and the Great Barrington Water District. I really think that a couple more additional models based on how things work elsewhere, I think are really warranted here. I think that there's a way that this solution can be resolved without sort of having one system over the other, and a vision for the question is, would one system work? Can we get an effective, efficient one system, one water system? Can the commercial ratepayers be the benefit of that be spread over to help all the residents, and then get the economy of scale, the efficiencies, and the capital planning for the water system. So I think you've done a great job, and I'm here to sort of push it to the next level, and happy to help. And I'm saying this notwithstanding that I understand the difficulties in there, but I think the model out there is one that is used in many other municipalities. So that's my thoughts.
Thanks, Jennifer. Those thoughts have been noted, and we will talk about them. Jay Bailey, just state your name and address for the record, please.
Jim Bailey, Housatonic. First of all, I feel buying a water company from the Mercers is about as ridiculous as buying a dump from the Mercers. And we all know how that worked out. That being said, why aren't the Mercers being held accountable? First of all, before we even consider anything, a purchase, I think it's important that that water system be functioning correctly. Water be, water what it should be. I don't think that the idea that the town buys this should even be looked at until, the Mercers are held accountable for, what they've been doing. I think it's important that we consider holding them accountable, making them right the system before we even consider purchasing it. Secondly, where's the state? Where's the federal government? Nobody stepped up. I haven't heard a single thing. Sitting in this audience today, I see an individual running for representative of our area. How come nobody's gotten the state involved, the federal government involved? Because there's only 850 voters? That's ridiculous. That's absurd. Lastly, old and undersized piping. That's what the experts came up with. Why are we taxing that water system by adding houses in Housatonic to that water system? It's bad enough that the Board of Health and the Select Board approved 20 new homes to be on that water system. That's ridiculous. Those water filtration systems you talked about adding to the homes, you couldn't tell me, an engineer couldn't tell me, nobody could tell me if that removes every bit of the contaminants, including the carcinogens. Nobody had an answer, but you approved it. I understand that the Affordable Housing Trust is looking to build more houses in Housatonic, in the Risingdale section. I think before you consider any more houses in Housatonic on that water system needs to be straightened out. You can't keep taxing that water system that these experts just said have old and inadequate piping, undersized piping. This needs to be taken care of, first of all, through the Mercers, before the town of Great Barrington, who spent way too much time on this already. Where's the federal and the state government? That's what I want to know. Thank you.
Thanks, Jim. Name and address, please.
Good evening. I'm Donna Jacobs, 260 Park Street. And when I found out Affordable Housing is going to put in units across the street from me, I was really excited because I thought, well, if they're going to build new housing, they're going to have to be sure that the water is good. And that means my water will be good too. I've been fighting this fight since I moved up here. And in the last couple of years, I challenged our Select Board and the Board of Health, both of whom declared they had no jurisdiction over a privately held water service. There was also the myth going around that the privately held water system was not eligible for state funding. again, that was wrong. The Board of Health has jurisdiction over our water system. The Select Board also has jurisdiction. We have a problem of accountability. Accountability that should have been taken 10 years ago. But because the system has been run without accountability, it's been mismanaged apparently. I don't know if they evidently don't know how to run a water system, how to keep it up to date. But there's been no oversight. No, the Board of Health doesn't seem interested or didn't seem interested in testing the water in Housatonic, in spite of the fact we've been saying it's brown, we'd like independent testing. We have an issue of accountability here, and this preliminary study that we're watching tonight, I understand it's preliminary, but I gotta say it's very, very scary because it's holding the residents, the ratepayers, accountable. The town doesn't want to take on the cost of it, so who's going to be accountable? The ratepayers. Now, some of us can afford the extra $12 a month for our water, but some of us cannot. And you're asking people in your community, people who are entitled to water provided by the municipality, you're asking us to, again, be victimized by the situation and pay the bill. Now, I am so impressed by my fellow Housatonic supporters, or water supporters, and their knowledge. And I really would hope that this town, as it moves into the future, as it is a growing town, and it's not going to remain a backwater town much longer. It's a growing town. We need to use all of our resources. We have some very smart people around who can help you understand what's on the ground, what's in Housatonic, and what we might do. There have been some great suggestions tonight. I hope you listen to them carefully, and I hope that this town is going to take some accountability, finally.
Thank you, Donna. Just unmute yourself and state your name and address, please. It just says iPhone.
Yeah. Hi, it's Andy Barron's, 1079 Main Street, Housatonic. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, thanks, Steve. Just a couple of questions and I guess a couple of statements too. I mean, obviously, we're dealing with several problems here. One is the quality of the water, which we still don't know exactly what's in the water, and the Board of Health, is trying to get some more information. But the other is trying to purchase the water company, because obviously, I think, as you can tell from the comments on this call and from the engineering reports that you have gotten, the ACOM report, a lot of the infrastructure has been neglected by the current owners. And so I guess a couple of questions would be, what about the purchase price as it's dictated in the charter from, I think it was like 1897 or so, that has a formula in it for what the purchase price should be from the water company. So that's number one. And then the second question is that second study you did, I can't remember which consulting firm you used, it did the three methodologies. One of them was a DCF. And I mean, how do you do a DCF without considering the CapEx that's required to maintain or fix the infrastructure? I mean, if you're going to buy, for example, a good analogy, if you're going to buy a car and the person hasn't changed the oil for 10 years and the engine burns out, I mean, how much is that car worth? You'd have to take the cost of, putting a new engine in it and repairing it. And that doesn't seem to be part of any of those analyses that came up with the $2.3 million. And I would argue the waterworks and the Mercer shouldn't be paid anything if they've neglected it. And now, the cost to resurrect it and correct the problems from the years of neglect is more than the actual value of the company. And I guess that leads to the third question for the engineering firm maybe is what are they assuming is in their calculations? You may have said this, but I came in late. Are you assuming the $31 million for the infrastructure? I mean, the ACOM report made it pretty clear that the biggest problem right now is the distribution system. And we don't know that this greenfield filter that's been proposed is really going to do anything. It may help with some of the brown water, but because it's so disparate and the pipes are so old, there are a lot of problems that including the groundwater that could be coming from that. So I guess the question is what is in this proposal that the engineering firm has put forth in terms of the CapEx? Are you saying that if the town buys the water structure, they're going to spend the $31 million over 20 or 40 years? Thanks.
So there's a few questions in there that I think we can tackle here. One was in reference to the Raftellus study where they valued the system at $2.3 million. That valuation, in my interpretation, is tied to a privately owned asset, potentially sold to another privately owned asset. As we stated in one of our slides, we think the value of the system is like super negative, right? So you have some value, some value for the infrastructure that exists, but a huge capital liability, which I believe the caller referenced. In terms of what we presented in the projections, we utilized the exact capital plan for years 0 through 5 from AECOM. I feel like it was about like $15 million worth of pipe replacement. And then we utilized the same capital plan that is projected in the DPU settlement by Housatonic Waterworks. Again, trying to use the most objective data we have. I don't know that the solution is complicated, cost aside. Like, it's clearly distribution system upgrades, larger pipes, and some treatment improvements. It's the challenge of the magnitude of the capital over those short 5 years, that whether the current water users are paying it with no change, whether the town is participating, whether there's a hybrid financing role, all of those formulas include a pretty massive capital plan for that asset.
Just to clarify one thing, and there are 2 select board members at least who will speak, and I'm not speaking for the select board. I'll just say in general, the select board haven't made any decision of what we're going to do moving forward. We were waiting for this report to come out. But balancing, the fact is, paying something for the company or prolonged negotiations and not buying the company means just a longer period of time with Brown Water and Housatonic. So there's that balancing act that we have to figure out how we're going to handle. So there have been no decisions made. We are waiting for this to come out, but we're eager to hear what everyone has to say.
Hi, Meg Murray. I live on Main Street in Housatonic. We've had brown water this year daily from April till the end of September. I actually just have a question about, I was going to ask something else, but now I'm curious what you meant by that, the prolonged period of brown water in negotiations, and how that would change based on if things stay the same.
The longer we negotiate with Housatonic Water, or we decide not to purchase Housatonic Water, the Housatonic Water hasn't shown an ability or a guarantee that the water is going, with the fixes that they're proposing, is going to all of a sudden become clear, because there's many people who think it's not just manganese, it's the infrastructure. And therefore, if they continue to own it, there is the possibility, probably a real possibility, that that water is going to stay brown for a longer period of time. Now, if we purchase it or another private company purchases it, it's not going to magically, and everyone knows this, clear up. But hopefully that process will start from day one so that there is an end to this nightmare.
Thank you. So my original question before that one was just a quick one. What does the town have in terms of flexibility of how we propose this to the town of Great Barrington? I know earlier on you mentioned that it would be a hard sell for the Great Barrington town proper to convince them to pay for water twice. And I know Sharon touched on this briefly, but I know that most of us in Housatonic are either full-time living year-round or rentals, when so much of Great Barrington proper are second homeowners. And just sort of thinking about kind of what our flexibility is in finding that funding, whether it can be taxes on second homeowners or, annual property taxes or things like that that can cover what everybody here is talking about is sort of our right. And I think that's where, when you are all presenting it to the town of Great Barrington, to us it's like not whether or not the taxes are going to go up, it's whether or not we have access to something that they already have access to. And I just want to know if you've thought about how you might present that to the town.
It's just premature. We've thought about it, but we had to wait till these reports came out. We have to wait to see if it's possible, what we're going to decide to do. So that, well before the town meeting, and I'm going to go out on a limb and say it's going to be a special town meeting, if there is one, those questions will be answered.
Okay, thank you.
Philip, name and address, please.
Yes, Phil Orenstein, 4 Alfred Road in Great Barrington. This is for the consultant. Let me confirm that I heard this right, that you were comparing the two scenarios. One, the Housatonic Waterworks capital plan in the DPU settlement proposal, and that's I'll say a lower number. And then you have the town plan based on the consulting report with a much larger capital plan amount. And you're comparing those two scenarios. So did you consider comparing those two scenarios based on a single capital plan, which would be, in my eyes, more of an apples to apples approach that would isolate some of the other differences in the, for example, in the length of the financing that was available?
It's a good question. We did not compare the exact capital plans. The reason we didn't is if nothing changes, Housatonic Waterworks has a capital plan that they've put out there that presumably that's how they would implement it. We didn't necessarily have access to the dollar values of the projects in their capital plan. It just showed what their 5-year total budgets were going to be from year 0 through year 5. In other words, it already incorporated their financing, so I'm not really positive about what the magnitude of those capital plans are. We could certainly go back and do that, although I would just caveat that I'm not sure I can segregate the debt or the capital from the Housatonic Waterworks budget without some input from that party.
Ben, go ahead.
Yeah. Ben Elliott, Housatonic, Selectboard. I'll admit that Phil and Andrew kind of asked the questions that I was planning on asking, but I think I've been standing up here for about 20 minutes now, so I decided to come up to the microphone anyway. I just want to say thank you to DPC for putting this together. I'm sorry it took this long, that you didn't have access to all of the data that you required. I hope you share the frustration of Housatonic Waterworks customers in dealing with Housatonic Waterworks. That's kind of what it's like to have to pay a bill to a company that gives you a subpar product every day. But again, I just want to thank everyone for coming out tonight, giving their comments and their ideas. And this is the first step in a continuing process, obviously. And I just want to remind everyone that you have 2 members from the board who are both Housatonic Waterworks customers, Eric and myself. We feel this personally. We live with this every day. I have to give my daughter this water, and it's painful. So we feel this personally. We are trying to get to the best solution for Housatonic and the town. Thank you.
Let's go to someone who hasn't spoken. We'll go back to people who've spoken. Amanda, go ahead. Just your name and address, please.
Ananda Timpane, Seekonk Crossroad, 139. I guess at first I just have a clarifying question. I'd like to confirm the Great Barrington Fire District. My understanding from this meeting is that is not part of the municipal structure of the town. That is an independent entity. Is that correct?
That is correct.
So it's accurate to say that right now there's nobody in Great Barrington who's Housatonic or otherwise whose water is provided through the town.
That is correct.
So I want to say, I think that the situation in Housatonic is egregious. I think it is it's unconscionable for people to be paying for water that is not drinkable, that is brown, that you can't put a load of laundry in without worrying what's going to happen to it. I also just think it's important for us as a larger community to understand accurately that the vote we're looking at to do something about this, if we do something about this through the municipality, through the town, means that we need Housatonic residents to vote for this. We need residents in Great Barrington who are using the fire district water, and people who are maintaining wells like myself. So I'm not in any way saying we shouldn't do this or that we don't need to do this. I just wanted to state clearly that understanding of the political reality that right now nobody is receiving their water through the town or through a system that's subsidized through town tax dollars, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Carol McGlinchey, Housatonic. One thing we haven't discussed is when Jim Mercer had his informational meeting with Housatonic Water Works customers, he refused to discuss what he considered the sale price, or the value of the company, even though he was pressed repeatedly. It seems like you're going on a huge hypothetical assumption that he would even accept $2.3 million. So where do we go from there?
So this would be negotiations. We are not assuming he would accept 2.3. We're not assuming we would offer 2.3. So this would be handled in negotiations, and you are absolutely correct.
So let's be realistic, knowing the track record of this family and what would happen with the town dump. What's Plan B after 2.3 million is offered?
We don't have a Plan B. We have talked about Plan B. There's many people to talk about Plan B. It was alluded to tonight by Mr. Bailey about eminent domain. We have no desire to do that, so we're just taking this one step at a time. But the 2.3 million is not a number that we're going to just say, yes, that's what we're going to accept. That number is from a consultant, and if you read further, that says 2.3, but it needs $31 million worth of infrastructure repairs. So the 2.3 is not a number that's cast in stone.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Maureen, go ahead. Just state your name and address, please.
I'm Maureen Quigley, 7 Depot Street. So I just have several points to bring up. I know everyone keeps on discussing the brown water, and I could have brown water and my neighbor has clear water. So one of the biggest issues, and that keeps on coming up. However, what we had wanted was further testing done in clean water, which it sounds like that's not part of the process right now. However, we don't know what's in the water. It is an assumption that it's caused by manganese, and I think you had mentioned that, Steve. And sadly, I feel that we had extremely poor counsel. There is plenty of data and evidence that could have had that hearing go a very different avenue. So I think one is the water that people are drinking, whether it's brown, whether it's clear, is it safe to drink? And we do not have that testing done. And I think that that is a big priority to have that testing. So at least we know where we stand currently in the now. And then, you said that's not even on the books about providing safe, clean drinking water for the people, which this is going to take a long time to fix. However, that is also a priority that people have clean drinking water. So I think that's a top thing. The other thing, do we know about Great Barrington Fire District? What is their infrastructure like? Maybe they don't have brown water, but have they been updating their pipes and doing things that they need to do?
Yeah, I can't quantify it, but certainly the fire district has had a track record, of upgrading their system over the years.
Okay. The other question, Steve, so it's my understanding that if it was owned by the town, that we would have more access to federal and state funding. And I heard someone else say that that's not the case. But my understanding is that is the case, that if the town has it, that you do get more funding for it, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. So I don't think it's in the best interest to have a private entity buy it. The other big concern that I would have is, my understanding is the GB Fire District, their aquifer sits over by the airport, which is a whole nother issue. So whether you have Housatonic Water or you have Great Barrington Fire District, you only have a sole source of water. There's no backup for either of the companies. So I don't know why the fire district isn't interested in having the town do it, because it gives us much more access to money in getting things cleaned up. And then you have two sources of water for everyone, not just one and everything's separated. So, I don't know if that's been considered in the whole entire process. And it's not just here, it's across the country that the infrastructure is poor. So the money needs to get put into it. Because Steve, we don't have clean drinking water. You have very poor outcomes in many different ways. So I think it needs to be done. I don't think it needs to wait for Housatonic Waterworks to do upgrades or anything like that. I think the sooner the better, and start getting funding in and get the testing done and see if people need to have more immediate water supplied to them that is safe, that could possibly have contaminants in it that we're not aware of.
Thanks, Maureen.
You're welcome.
Jessica Burlingame, 213 Highland Street, where, by the way, I'm a longtime tenant, but I closed on that property. I became a HWW customer, homeowner, 13 days ago. So I have a lot riding on this. Buying a house is a leap of faith ever. I made a big leap of faith. I have faith in this town. I have faith this is going to work out. A couple of comments and one question. First of all, pursuant to what I just said, I appreciate the emphasis on an end to this thing, on expediency, on efficacy. I appreciate that more than I can say. Principles are there, but I'm grateful for the pragmatism. Second comment, purchase is a really odd terminology to use in this scenario. I think about this as the potential assumption of over $30 million in liabilities incurred by Mercer through negligence, through prolonged negligence. And those liabilities would be incurred in the public interest, both as a matter of ethics, to supply drinkable and usable water to residents, and also in the interest of the long-term tax base of Housatonic and Great Barrington as the town becomes more attractive, as the infrastructure becomes more able to support residents, investors, long-term. Third point is a question. That was a great chart with the blue and orange and green, talking about the scenarios of cost projected to HWW customers. Is there a comparable projection for Great Barrington town customers? Because I think it's sort of a boogeyman right now. What's it going to cost the Great Barrington residents? Are there those projections for them too? And can that be done?
It wasn't part of this project, so it hasn't been done to date. I'd defer to Steve relative to that opportunity.
Are you referring to Great Barrington Fire District residents? Or are you referring, there's a lot of entities here. Or are you referring to Great Barrington residents if they chipped in for Housatonic Water?
I don't know, you tell me. I think it's, what's it going to cost Great Barrington? What's it going to cost the town? What does it mean? What does the town mean? What does it mean to, Joe Sixpack living in Great Barrington? I think that's this huge unknown. And without any numbers about it, it becomes a nightmare scenario. And I'm thinking there must be some way to provide some projections just in black and white to see what would it actually mean to your average Great Barrington resident.
Yeah, as I've said before, and they're all good questions, this is the last piece of the puzzle. Now those numbers will have to come together. You're absolutely right. We need to get those numbers. We agree.
All right. Thank you. Remember, big leap of faith. This is the biggest leap of faith I've ever made in my life, is on the town of Housatonic. So
Congratulations.
I'm counting on everybody here. Thank you.
James, go ahead.
Good evening, Board. Yes, good evening, Board. This is James Garzone, 84 North Plain Road. Water is a basic right, and that is our number one priority, to make sure that our residents have clean water. With that said, we all agree that Housatonic Waterwork has been negligent and deceitful in how they mismanage our water system. I'll give you facts. You know, there was a testing sample that exceeded safe drinking levels that they hid, that came from a home that they own. That just shows how deceitful they are. And that presentation 2-3 weeks ago was a farce. You know, as we all heard, he refused to give a number. He made some statements that we all know to be untrue, that the water will be cleaned once the filtration sand system is up and running. They're testing. I mean, we've heard this before. We all agree that Mr. Mercer should be held liable, that whatever number is probably too great, because we've all had to endure this undrinkable, unlivable water, number one. Number two, unfortunately, what we're facing as a town is not only the number one priority is making sure that our residents have water, is a looming economic issue with our school. We are potentially going to be asked to fund a $150 million school, you know, minus some grant money from the state. That's going to be on upcoming special town meeting, maybe this year, next year, whatever. We also have failing bridges and infrastructure that we're also dealing with. But I want to state the number one priority has to be our drinking water. And Mr. Mercer in the Housatonic Waterworks needs to be held accountable. We all agree. But you're right, Steve. We need to make this as fast as possible because our residents have had too long to wait for clean water for their families, for themselves, for their children. That's inexcusable. And I'm thankful that the Select Board is doing the best that they can, but we need better legal representation. As someone just mentioned, what happened a couple of weeks ago in the court did not bode well for us. The judge was very clear in his statements. So I hope that this is not the final piece. This is just another piece to the puzzle, with another piece coming legal. With another piece is, like the woman just said, the final numbers to everyone. You know, we're in this together. I don't like when we say Housatonic is a backcountry. No, we are one. And we are committed to stay together and make this right. So this is just another piece. And lastly, I know, and I'm grateful that we said this is not an analogy when you purchase a house. Because when we all purchase a house and we agree on a price, we then get an inspection. And then after the inspection comes, we go back to the seller and say, well, these are the items that we found, so please reduce your price. So let's not say this is like a purchase of a house, because it's totally different. So thank you, board, thank you, DPC, and thank you, everyone. We are one, and we will get this done as fast as possible. Thank you.
Thanks, James. Peter?
Hi, good evening. Peter Most, East Mountain Road. Just a few quick questions for DPC. Will you make this presentation available online?
It'll be posted on the town website.
Okay. And the average monthly costs that were projected, none of that includes any amount for the purchase of the company, correct? Those are just CapEx expenditures?
Nope. It's full budget. It's capital, debt service, O&M.
But does it include any purchase price?
It does.
And that's the 2.3?
That's the 2.3.
Okay. So then the next question is, Steve, for you. We've heard a lot about the 1897 charter and the inputs and the town's right to buy under the charter. Do you have the information available to look at the charter and determine what the purchase price would be under the charter?
As I understand it, and the answer, simple answer, Peter, is not, no, we don't. As I understand that there's been many owners since 1897, and that those numbers may not be readily available or easy to come by. So that's probably going to be a legal process.
Much like the Mercer's not providing information to DPC, they haven't provided the information that they have to the town to make the purchase, that purchase price.
Not as of yet.
Okay. And then did DPC attend the Mercer's Jim Mercer's presentation? No. In that presentation, Mr. Mercer said that he anticipated he could drill wells, and then that would improve everything. And I'm just wondering if you have any opinion with respect to his suggestion that a way to clean the water is actually not to follow the plan that was approved at the DPU, but to drill wells instead.
I don't have an opinion on it because honestly, I don't know anything about what was stated. I can say back to an earlier point that I believe the capital plan that was presented by AECom is appropriate as the solution for the infrastructure. It's not the only consultant that's come up with that iteration of that plan. I think kind of several of them have over the years. So I think you have your answer, at least in terms of how to do it right and do it once.
And then, Steve, you said to get the information may require litigation. I presume you've asked the Mercers for the information for the 1897 charter, and they've said what?
I'm not sure we have asked them yet. I'm not sure we're at that point, but that will be going on. But they're not the only owner, obviously. They're from the 1980s, and it goes farther back than that, and we'll have to see if that information is available.
Okay, thank you.
Maggie, just state your name and address, please.
Hi, this is Danielle Liss. I live on Meadow Street. I'm just trying to clarify. I'm still confused why Plan A is not to hold Mercer accountable.
We have not said we don't.
That's it.
That we have a plan. So we haven't said what our plan A or B is. Surely we can hold the Mercers accountable. In the same balance, what we want to do is get the water cleaned up as fast as possible in Housatonic. And those two plans may not coincide. They may be direct opposites. We could be in litigation for 5 or 10 years to hold them accountable, which, if that's what the townspeople want to do, we will follow the directions of the townspeople, but that's not going to help with the water. And as I think it was Maggie or Maureen may have said, someone with an M, said that just because the water is clear in some places doesn't mean it's safe. So there's a dilemma here that we all have to deal with, not just the select board, but the town, and we'll have to figure that out. Lee, go ahead.
Lee Davis, Great Barrington. So a couple things I want to mention. You know, mediation is going to be key for this, and I think people need to realize that, you know, the select board are on your side. We're going to be fighting for you, and we're going to make sure that Jim Mercer and Housatonic Waterworks has skin in the game. I mean, that's what really we want. They need to have skin in the game. If there's going to be any acquisition, they shouldn't get away with anything. I personally don't think they should get a dime. And we're going to be fighting as hard as we can. I'm going to be fighting as hard as I can to make sure that we can hopefully acquire this and not spend a penny for it. And whether that comes in, you know, congressional directed spending, which is basically an earmark from the federal government, from help from the state, or you know, ensuring that Housatonic Waterworks avails of the state revolving loan, which they can be. They could have been having money from the state years and years ago. And this is something that I brought up at the meeting that we had last week. And I asked Jim Mercer if he knew about the state revolving fund, and he said no, and I sent him information. So, you know, we have to make sure that, you know, they could have been availing of state funds years ago through this revolving fund that we're talking about here. There's actually two different ones that they could be using. There's the Drinking Water State Revolving Fund, which is DWSRF. And then there's another one, the Clean Water State Revolving Fund. And both of these are open to privately owned water utilities. So that's something that they should have been working with. And also they received $350,000 EPA grant, as we all know. And the other question I brought up at last week's meeting is, where is that money going? I mean, that should be money that is used to bring down the rates for the customer. So we want to make sure that money is applied to the customers. And, you know, my focus is making sure they have skin in the game, that we don't pay a dime for this, and that we're, you know, seeking funds from either the state or the federal government. And I will address James Bailey, since he brought it up. You know, when Senator Ed Markey came to town to campaign with me, you know, that could have been any other town, but I brought him to Great Barrington to start the conversation around congressional directed spending, hopefully for Housatonic. So that conversation is happening. I've had 3 conversations with his team. So there is a bigger picture, and the Great Barrington Select Board will make sure that we have proper legal representation, and we're gonna fight for you, and we're gonna make sure that, you know, the Housatonic Waterworks has skin in the game, that we don't pay a dime for this, because this is not worth anything. I mean, this is what, minus $35 million, right? So just know that when we go back to the state, you know, to the select board, we're gonna be working hard for you, and we're gonna have mediation, and we're gonna be represented with people that know what they're doing and that will fight for us. So just, you know, trust the process, and I'm very, very thankful for DPC for presenting this. This is, you know, as we keep saying, this is part of the puzzle, and we needed this piece to make a good recommendation. So we are behind you, and we are listening to you, and thank you very much.
Thanks, Lou. There's one person online, but they've already spoken, so I'm going to go with people in person, then I'll go back to the person online.
Hello, my name is Leslie Gabriel, and I'm actually here as a member of the press. I have a podcast called And So It Flows, started in Great Barrington 2005 and now in Pittsfield. A couple of things. First of all, I acknowledge you all for being on the tip of the spear. According to some, there's over close to $1 trillion in spending that needs to be done on water systems, and here we are dealing with what needs to be dealt with and getting the money back here in the United States where we need it. One question. I have a total of 3. So on the ref, tell us fair market value. So I'm thinking to myself, if I was going to go buy a bottle of water, would I buy a bottle of brown water? And on there you have this discount for lack of marketability. Now, most people would think brown bottled water would not be marketable. Where did you get that 10%? And don't you think it needs to be higher?
I just refer you back to the RefTel study. That wasn't our data, so
That's not your data.
I can't speak to that detail.
No idea how they come up with that 10%.
They came up with their opinion of what they thought the asset was worth. You know, you put 10 engineers in a room, they're going to give you 10 different answers. The middle of it's probably generally the same from consultant to consultant. I still stand by our opinion that the asset has very little, if any, value.
Yeah,
okay.
Totally. Agreed. Another thing I was reading up in the Smithsonian magazine back in 2012, Great Barrington was listed as #1 of best towns in America. Then the question is, would you think that the best town in America has their water handled?
Is that a rhetorical question?
No, it's actually, would you think that the best town in America should have their water handled?
That's why we're working on this. We obviously think it should be.
Good. So that's just shows a little bit of like keeping the eye on the ball, and that's a good ball to, you know, best town in America has their water handled. And then finally is when it comes to testing, there are academia and institutions that provide consulting services to towns and villages and cities that are dealing with water issues, specifically when it comes to contaminants. Has the select board thought of or already has a specific water testing consultant?
Not at this point.
I would highly recommend it. One of the people I had to interview in the last year was someone who went into East Palestine, that a few weeks after the Norfolk Southern train derailment, which still hasn't been dealt with. However, he went as part of Purdue University's team to actually speak to that the EPA was clearly lying. And he had the scientific evidence to show. So my recommendation, both as someone who's interested in life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness with water, is that you have the people on your side to win the game.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Eric, you're next.
Thank you. Eric Gabriel, 1052 Main Street. I just want to put out a few statements here. I think at the end of the day, I really appreciate your presentation and all the work that went into it. I want to refer to the chart that had all the graphs as far as cost. And I want to point out a few things at the end of the day. That the graph, at the end of the day, the numbers all come in pretty close at the end of 5 years. You see the blue line, which has the full town purchase, and it's ending the lowest. And that is also with the calculation of a very aggressive pipe replacement plan. The brown line, just to be clear, is what Housatonic Water Works, if they're capable and ever actually complete what they say they're going to do, ends higher there. And it's only a $2 million upgrade. The blue dotted line is $16.5 million of well-needed infrastructure repair projections on that sheet there. I just want to make sure that that is clear to everybody. No one wants to pay for a dilapidated, neglected system that they wash their babies in with brown water. At the end of the day, how long do we want that problem around for? How long are we going to sit in denial that the present owners are actually going to fix anything? Sometimes you have to rip the Band-Aid off and deal with the pain to get things to where they need to be. I'm not suggesting that we give them a wheelbarrow full of money. I'm just saying sometimes there's actions that have to be made to get the problem solved. Sometimes you might have to give some capital. Sometimes you might have to spend years in court. If we want this done quickly or quicker than the projections of doing nothing, that's just something I need everybody to consider. I also want to state that at the end of the day, it's about clean water. And as Leslie said, the best town in America, when it comes to a vote, I find it hard to believe that my neighbors in Great Barrington and Housatonic are not going to vote for clean water. So there's still a lot of work to do. This is the last step, the select board, and everybody has a lot of discussions to have. Everybody has to think on this real well and understand. There's frustration. Sometimes you have to put those away and think about the long-term goals and what's right. Housatonic is a town filled with a lot of young families. And we got to think about the long-term goals of our future. So, Thank you, everybody, for coming out tonight. Thank you, everybody, for participating online here, and thank you again for the report.
Sharon, I'm going to let Ellen go. She's online. She spoke before, and then I'll let you go. And then we'll wrap it up, unless someone else wants to speak who hasn't spoken. Ellen, go ahead, briefly.
Thanks for letting me have a second question here. Do these, excuse me, do these estimates and projections that have been presented tonight include issues around the cost of real estate? The Housatonic water operation sits within the Long Pond real estate, which is owned by the Mercer family, as I understand it. That is a potential hidden wild card here. Let's say the town decides to acquire the company and everything comes together and everybody agrees. What happens then when the Mercers say, oh, well, you have to lease the real estate underneath this water system? It seems like a potential hidden disaster, to put it lightly. It doesn't seem like that's quite been addressed here. That's a very valuable piece of real estate, and I think we need to think about that. It seems to me like the closest clean water that we can access is from the Great Barrington Fire District, and the town has to figure that out, how to make this work using an existing system where they have existing expertise and ability to manage a water system. And my final question is, there was a pot of money made available from the state last year to help people pay for filtration, water filters, et cetera. How much is left of that fund? And if there is anything left in that fund, can people reapply to help them again with their ongoing filtration costs or whatever they're doing to have clean water?
So Mark will provide an answer to that at the next select board. There's plenty of money available and people can apply if they haven't already, and then we'll talk about reapplying. And as far as the real estate, that hasn't been considered yet. That's not part of this report and was not asked to be part of this report. So there are 3 more people online. I'll let Sharon go, and then there's 3 more people with their hands up.
Thanks, Steve. Sharon Gregory, Hollenbeck Avenue. Somebody asked the question about whether or not Housatonic has been keeping up their infrastructure. And since I memorized it from the DPC report from 2018, it says that Great Barrington Fire District has replaced at least something like 38% of their pipes, whereas Housatonic Waterworks, the number was about 17%. So Great Barrington Fire District has replaced more. Second point is that, you know, even though there's this requirement that the DPU has put on Housatonic Waterworks, they didn't say much of anything that I remember about pipes. So besides the things that, you know, deal with filtration systems, there are a lot of other things that, you know, if you have somebody that doesn't really even want to do the filtration system unless you double your, unless they double their rates, then how about the rest of it, the pipes, the intake, and so forth? And finally, somebody asked about, you know, we should use the Great Barrington Fire District water. The fire district has been trying to get a second source because Massachusetts requires us to have a backup source. And they have asked for, as I mentioned before, $5 million. $2 million was to link the pipe to Housatonic water so we could have a second source. And a couple of $1 million was trying to dig for additional water. They don't have another second source. So there's a motivation for Great Barrington to come up with a, you know, to contribute to a full system. So if we could do that analysis that, you know, I talked about before, I think it would be less scary for everybody. The people who own the most property will be paying for the most capital expenditures, and it'll be different from the water usage, and that's different than the way HWW bills their clients.
Thanks, Sharon. So there's three more online. Kate?
Hi, Kate Van Olst, 24 Hart Street, Housatonic. Thank you, everyone who has attended in person online, and thank you for this report. I wanted especially to highlight and echo what Eric Gabriel said before, because I think that's the really important point, is that frustrations are high, and we need to set those aside and try to get clean water quickly. I am so happy, Lee Davis, to hear the fire in you about this, and I really hope that we can get there and pay nothing for it. But I also want to make sure that as a Great Barrington taxpayer, I am bearing the burden of the costs related to this acquisition in terms of studies and future legal fees, and then the potential cost of an acquisition itself. And then as a Housatonic Waterworks customer, I am bearing the costs of the legal battle from the other side, as well as the rising costs of poor water. And so for those of us who are in this sort of double bind, it would help me the most to get this done quickly, whether that means not fighting down to the last penny. I think it's a really important point that we look at not just cost, but also time. The other thing I just wanted to highlight is I'm not sure if all of the select board members were able to attend that October 16th presentation from just Jim Mercer, but I again just wanted to highlight what others have said, which was that he made it extremely clear that he does not intend to cooperate with the town of Great Barrington. He does not intend to collaborate, provide any transparency, and he made it extremely clear in several cases that he believes that he is sitting on a large asset in the water company. So we do need to be prepared for a long and difficult legal battle. Thank you.
Thanks, Kate. Rebecca, just unmute yours. iPhone, I'm sorry, iPhone.
Yeah, hi, it's Sandy Behrens again. Thanks, Steve, for letting me make one more comment. I just wanted to make another comment that's similar to what Sharon just said. It's obvious that there are a lot of things to consider moving things forward, but it's clear we do need to move things forward. It's obviously much clearer than the color of Housatonic water. And I think the only way this is going to get done, the only way that Great Barrington residents are going to vote for this is for both systems to be overhauled completely. We don't need a semi-private water system in Great Barrington. They've said they don't want to be involved in this. You know, I think there's some ties with Housatonic Water and some of the members of the Great Barrington Fire District, but they do need the backup water source, and they are making plans to connect the systems. I think the select board should think about a bigger picture solution that can be a prototype for the whole country. We need there to be one governing body for all of Great Barrington, including the village. It should be owned by the town, managed by the town, and funded by the town. And this is a textbook example of why utilities should not be owned by private for-profit organizations. And it will probably be a case study at some university in the near future. So I really think we need to think bigger than putting all the finances and expenses on the back of the village, because we do pay taxes that pay for the police department, roads, the bridges, the library, the select board, everything. The village pays, it contributes to that. And, if everyone in the village decides to leave the village because the water continues to suck, that's going to be a decrease in the taxes and revenue stream for Great Barrington. So I urge the select board to think bigger picture than just, a small, negotiation and creating a separate entity. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Livia Duque Dresco. I live in 224 Oak Street. I went to a first meeting 10 years ago, 11 years ago, and because the same issue of the brown water. So at that time, Mr. Mercer said that he wanted to raise the price because he was going to fix the problem. He didn't. He didn't. We were paying at that time $35 every month. Look at how much we are paying now. And he hasn't do anything, nothing. So to me, hearing that Great Barrington is involved right now is music to my ears. Because finally, there is a light at the end of the tunnel that we are going to have clean water. So I really appreciate it, and we should approve this without hesitation to say yes. Let's do it. It doesn't matter how the chart said how much money we are going to pay. We have been paying anyways, and there won't be solution at all. So let's go together and let's get it done. And thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I'm so looking forward to have clean water. Again, thank you. And have a good night.
Okay, the last caller is Maureen.
Wait, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, sorry. For having a clean water supply. I mean, there's companies like Oxfam. I don't know if you've heard of Oxfam. I mean, that go in to many areas and set up water infrastructure very quickly. So there's a lot of things, a lot of options out there to provide clean drinking water that is cost effective in the interim. Because even if and when all these upgrades are happening, I still think that the town needs to consider a main source for people to be able to get clean drinking water on a regular basis, and just not, oh, this week the water's brown, so let's hand out water. We need to get it tested and have that water available. And it can be purchased, supply and demand. The more you need, the better the price. So it can be provided in bulk for the village. Thank you.
Thanks, Maureen. Just want to thank everyone who came tonight. There were about 70 people online. I counted about 60 people here. This won't be the last. We'll have more of these as we have more information. We'll provide it to you. So thank you, everyone, for coming. Have a good night.